Hi Year 3, thank you so much for joining us for our first Vipers session. I hope you're all well and staying safe at home. Today we're actually starting a new book and it's called Mouse, Bird, Snake, Wolf. It's written by David Almond and it's illustrated by Dave McKean. Now the illustrations are really lovely in this book, so I'm going to try and show you them as much as possible. You might have already noticed that we've got 3 Vipers questions on this session. We've got a retrieval question, an inference question and a prediction question. I'm going to ask you them as we go along, so I'll get you to pause your video and we'll go through them together. Okay, shall we get started? Long ago and far away, in a world rather like this one, and with people in it rather like us, there were 3 children, Harry, Sue and Ben. Ben was known as Little Ben because he was so small. Like many worlds, the world they lived in was a marvellous place filled with marvellous things. It was safe and calm and rather wonderful, but it was a strange place as well. There were gaps and holes in it. There were places where there seemed to be nothing at all. Places that were filled with emptiness. Some of these were as huge as deserts. Some were no bigger than a fingernail. The trouble was, the gods who had made this world had become rather fat and rather too pleased with themselves. Oh yes, they had worked great wonders in the days gone by. They had made mighty mountains, tender flowers. Tender means gentle or delicate. Rivers, forests, seas. They had made astounding animals. Astounding means amazing. The elephant, the camel, the whale, and man and woman, of course, and babies and children. And beasts that we in our world have no names for. Let's take a look at this beast, it's quite interesting. Just down here. But now they spent their days, day after day, lying on their clouds, sipping tea together and nibbling sandwiches and cakes. They chatted about their creations and gazed down at them with their deepest fondness. Right, we're going to take a pause there because I think we can answer one of our questions. Yes, you're right, it's the retrieval one. What do the gods spend their days doing? Now, if you remember correctly, the gods spend their days on the clouds, sipping tea together and nibbling sandwiches and cakes. Now, that sounds pretty good to me. I'd like to do that myself. Let's carry on with our story. Your elephant, sir, is a thing of wonder, one would say to another. Ah, yes, indeed. But what about your chain of mountains and your sparkling ponds and streams? But each time I see your wisteria, my eyes fill with tears. Wisteria is a type of flower. Such restraint, such delicacy. Oh, and those sweet daisies. But your humpback whale, such magnificence, and your extraordinary zowet, your gazelle, oh, but your brant. And they would shrug and blush and lower their eyes. They'd be silent for a time, then they'd whisper, could any other gods come up with anything more astonishing? And in their smiles they'd answer, no, there are no other worlds like this one. There are no other gods like us. We are, indeed, the best of all gods in the best of all worlds. Now, take a pause just there. We are going to answer another of our questions. Yes, you're right, it's the inference one. What impression of the gods do you get? Now, I think the gods, they're quite full of themselves, aren't they? I think they like to show off. They're showing off about all the amazing things that they've created. And if you remember right, they said that there were no other worlds like theirs. They're quite boastful, aren't they? Right, we're going to carry on. And so they lay on their clouds and floated through the sky and took tea and slept and snored. And yes, they did tell one another what they would make once they got back to work. If only they had the energy. Oh, they're quite lazy too. And if only they had the time. But in truth, their world was still unfinished, still had many gaps and spaces in it, and there was still much making to be done. Can you see? Ben's just sat down here. I wonder what he might be thinking. One day, Harry, Sue and little Ben decided to go wandering. Not too far, just through fields and woods around their homes. They walked on walls, climbed over fences, jumped across streams, swung from trees. They dared one another to dash and to leap through empty spaces, which could be a little scary, but great fun. After a while, they lay down on the soft turf beneath a gnarled old tree and beside a sparkling stream, and they rested. Can you see them all down here? All of a sudden, little Ben said in surprise, as if he'd never thought of it before, "This is a very peculiar world." He looked up at the clouds. "Why are there so many gaps and spaces in it?" he yelled. The gods took no notice. "It needs more things in it," he said. Still, no notice. Little Ben sighed. "Have you ever looked into an empty space?" he asked his friends. "Of course we have," they said. "Sometimes," little Ben continued, "when you look up into an empty space, you can kind of see something in it." "Something in an empty space?" said Harry. "Yes," said Ben. "You can sort of see what's missing from it." "Like what?" asked Harry. "Like a mouse." "A mouse?" said Harry. "What on earth is a mouse?" "I don't quite know," said Ben. He wrinkled his nose and scratched his head. It's a kind of mousy thing, I suppose." Harry shook his head and Sue rolled her eyes. "Yes," said Ben. "It's a mousy thing. A funny little squeaky scampering thing." "Then it is just like you," said the others. "Yes," laughed Ben, and he thought of a mouse inside himself. Let's take a look. Can you see? A mouse is just inside his head. That's what he's thinking. "Tell you what," he said. "I'll show you what one looks like. Watch." He glanced up at the sky. The gods weren't looking. He gathered some wool and some petals and some nuts and made for the shape of a mouse with it. He laid it on the grass. "Squeak and scamper, little mouse," he whispered. "Come along, don't be shy, squeak and scamper." The children laughed. They didn't really believe that the mouse would squeak and scamper, but as they watched, it started to tremble and wake. "Oh, look!" they cried. "What a lovely little thing it is!" The mouse tottered on its tiny feet. It sniffed the air. It peeped up to the sky with its little bright eyes. It squeaked again, and squeaked again, and scampered right away. The children clapped their hands. "It seemed quite at home," they said. Ben giggled. "At last!" he exclaimed. "This is a world with a mouse in it, thanks to me!" And the children lay on the grass and thought of the mouse running through the fields and forests and the empty spaces and through their minds, and they were very pleased. Right, we're going to stop there and we're going to answer our final question. Now, our final question is the prediction question, and it's how do you think the gods will react when Ben creates the mouse? Now, I wasn't sure about this one. I half thought that the gods might be angry because they're the gods and the children, they're just humans. And the gods are a bit full of themselves, so maybe they think they're superior to the humans, so they're better than them. So maybe they'd be angry with Ben for thinking that he could be like a god. Or I thought maybe they wouldn't care, because do you remember it says the gods are taking no notice? So maybe the gods won't care because they think the humans are just being silly. I don't know, but we'll find out next time. Now, thank you so much for joining us for our first Vipers session. We will do another one shortly, so please stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.